Utility Regulatory Commission in a cause docketed before the Commission as cause number 46080, captioned as Petition of Indiana Michigan Power Company, I&M, for authority to adjust rates through I&M's tax rider to reflect the impact of an Internal Revenue Service private letter ruling and reconcile the crediting of unprotected accumulated deferred federal income tax in accordance with the orders in cause numbers 45235, 45576, and 45933. Notice of the time and place of the hearing was given as provided by law by publication in Marion County in the Indianapolis Star on August 1st, 2024, and in Allen County in the Journal Gazette on July 31st, 2024. These are newspapers of general circulation, and these publications were made at least 10 days prior to the date of the evidentiary hearing. The proofs of publication of the notices have been received by the Commission and are now incorporated into the record of this cause by reference and placed in the official files of the Commission. Notice has also been given to the Indiana Office of Utility Consumer Counselor and other interested parties. May we have appearances, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. On behalf of petitioner, Indiana Michigan Power Company, Teresa Neihart, Jeff Peabody, Kay Pashas, Tafts, Detinius, and Hollister, LLP, 1 Indiana Square, Suite 3500, Indianapolis, Indiana.
On behalf of Intervenor Wabash Valley Power Association. Okay. On behalf of Intervenor Wabash Valley Power Association, Inc., Jeremy Fetty and Robin Zocola, Par Ritchie, Indianapolis, Indiana.
Thank you, Your Honor. On behalf of Intervenor, I&M Industrial Group, Ann Becker and Joseph Rampala with the law firm of Lewis Kappas, 1 America Square, Suite 2500, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46282.
On behalf of the public, Lorraine Hitz, Indiana Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, Indianapolis, Indiana. On behalf of the public, okay.
Okay. Will all who know themselves to be witnesses in this cause please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn? Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you will give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Ms. Neihart, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Our first witness is going to be Michael Reno, but prior to moving forward with Mr. Reno, we would propose to have Mr. Peabody offer the evidence that for the witnesses who did not have to appear today. All right?
Yes, thank you.
Your Honor, at this time, the petitioner would move to admit what has been marked for identification purposes as Petitioner's Exhibit 5, Mr. Ross's direct testimony, including his attachment, THR1. Exhibit 6, Mr. Small's direct testimony, including his attachment, MSS1 and MSS2. Exhibit 8, the verified petition. Exhibit 9, the direct work papers. Exhibit 10, the public rebuttal work papers. And finally, Exhibit 10C, the confidential rebuttal work paper.
Any objections, Mr. Fetty?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Becker?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Hitz?
No objection, Your Honor.
Petitioners Exhibits 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 10C are admitted into the record of this cause.
Thank you, Judge. Petitioner calls Michael Reno to the stand.
We'll go off the record. We're back on the record.
Thanks, Judge. Mr. Reno, would you please state your name and business address for the record?
Michael Reno, Ernst & Young, 1101 New York Avenue Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20005.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm a managing director with Ernst & Young LLP.
Now, you've pre-filed and are offering rebuttal testimony in this case, correct?
Correct.
Now, do you have a document before you on the witness stand that we marked for identification purposes as Petitioner's Exhibit 7?
I do.
And is Petitioner's Exhibit 7 a copy of your rebuttal testimony?
It is.
And does it include the revised pages 6, 7, and 8 that were pre-filed in this case?
It does.
Do you adopt Petitioner's Exhibit 7 as your sworn testimony in this cause?
I do.
Your Honor, Petitioner would move to admit Petitioner's Exhibit 7.
Any objections, Mr. Fetty?
No objection.
Ms. Becker?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Hitz?
No objection, Your Honor.
Petitioner's Exhibit 7 is admitted into the record of this cause.
Thank you. The witness is tendered for cross-examination.
Mr. Fetty, you may proceed, and I'll remind you to keep your microphone very close and talk slowly, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Reno.
Good morning.
Welcome. Do you have a copy available of the private letter ruling request with you?
I do.
Okay. Viewed your testimony and your background. Fair to say you're knowledgeable in the process taken to issue private letter rulings.
Yes, I am.
In referencing, if you've got it available, the PLR filed by I&M, what do you, the private letter ruling? Are you familiar with the rulings requested in that filing?
I am.
And is it correct that the IRS will generally just answer the questions that are asked in the rulings requested?
That is correct.
In general, will not provide guidance outside of those rulings requested?
Yes, the IRS will not provide general tax guidance. They will only answer specific questions.
Did you provide assistance to any of to I&M or any of the AEP companies in preparing the private letter ruling filing?
I did not.
Have you reviewed and analyzed that filing?
I have reviewed the PLR, yes.
Could I get you to refer to page 7 of the private letter ruling? The first paragraph of page 7.
How does that start?
The receipt of cash.
Okay, yep, I'm with you.
In that section, in that paragraph, can you confirm that the quote enforcement matter refers to FERC docket A193-5-000?
I believe that is correct.
And can you is the reference to Commission B, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And the references to Form A and Form B is FERC Form 1 and 3Q respectfully?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Are you familiar with FERC docket A193-5-000?
Yes, I am.
Does FERC docket A193-5-000 discuss consolidated income taxes?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, we'll go off the record.
Yes, Your Honor.
We'll go back on the record.
Thank you. While we were off the record, I handed you a document entitled A193-5-000. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with question 17 regarding consolidated income taxes?
Yes, I am.
Does question 17 in the document I've handed you state that the receipt of cash from the parent company for the consolidated utilization of the net operating loss results in deferred tax asset being reduced to zero in the FERC Form 1?
It does not.
And is it correct that FERC docket number A193-5-000 explains that the accounting should be based on allocation of benefits and burdens?
Yes, that is what it says.
Is it correct that some tax sharing agreements require tax sharing payments and others do not require tax sharing payments?
I would think that all tax sharing arrangements would require tax sharing payments.
Are you aware of any FERC orders conditioning the reduction to the deferred tax asset on whether the tax sharing agreement involves a payment?
I'm not aware of any.
Referring back to the private letter ruling and page 7 of that, in that paragraph we were talking about before, that paragraph states that the receipt of cash from the taxpayer's parent company for the consolidated utilization of the NOL results in the DTA being reduced to zero on Commission B, Form A, and Form B. Do you think that statement is 100% accurate?
I'm not certain.
Is it possible that the IRS did not fully understand the FERC accounting requirements outlined in FERC docket number A195-5-000?
I would not know.
In your experience in power and utilities tax practice, have you seen other IRS private letter rulings other than from AEP companies where the utility was required to include an imputed amount of ADIT and rate base in order to maintain compliance with IRS normalization rules?
The IRS has ruled in other circumstances, particularly around investment tax credits, about the calculation on a separate company basis. No, I don't know specifically with respect to the NOL, ADIT. ADIT. Yes, accumulated deferred income taxes.
But you don't know any specific examples other than those recent private letter rulings by the AEP companies?
Correct.
With respect to the Indiana-Michigan private letter ruling, does a private letter ruling provide specific rules on how to reduce the imputed net operating loss carryover, ADIT?
Well, the private letter ruling describes that the separate company NOL must be included in the ADIT balance.
Does it specify how to reduce that?
I think it's a straight netting, right? You add the two together. I'm not sure what other method we would use.
Can you identify the part of the private letter ruling that you're referencing?
I'm not. I'm just using what I would say is common sense about if you need to include one balance in another balance, you would add them together or net them if they're opposite signs. But it does not say specifically to, add A plus B. It says include them together.
So you can't point to anywhere in the private letter ruling where it specifies how to reduce that.
It does not specifically address that.
Thank you. Is it correct that the method to reverse the imputed net operating loss carryover ADIT must be based on the taxable income on a separate return basis derived from the depreciable assets subject to accelerated depreciation?
No, the NOL will reverse based on taxable income of the separate return. It's not dependent on the book tax timing difference related to accelerated depreciation to reverse.
Your Honor, may we have a moment to confer?
We'll go off the record. We'll go back on the record.
And we would like to mark and go ahead and offer in A1935.
Okay, we'll go off the record.
How did you mark it?
Yes.
Is it just what, is it CX1? I assume, I thought so, but thought I would ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Gotcha. That's what he's talking to. All right, thank you.
We're back on the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would like to offer into the record what's been marked as Exhibit WVPA CX1. It's titled A193-5000 Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Any objections? Ms. Neidhart?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Becker?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Hitz?
No, Your Honor.
WVPA Cross Exhibit 1 is admitted into the record of this cause.
We have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Reno.
Thank you.
Any additional cross-examination questions for Mr. Reno, Ms. Becker?
No, Your Honor, but I'd like to welcome him to Indiana.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Hitz?
Actually, I do. I didn't think I was going to. Welcome, Mr. Reno.
Thank you.
Sorry I'm having to bother you, but,
That's why I'm here.
okay. So, looking at your rebuttal testimony, you have revised this testimony several times. Is that correct?
Had one revision here, yes.
One revision?
Was there two? I mean, multiple places, yes. I
Okay.
thought you,
And could you turn to pages 6 and 7? I believe that's where the most recent revisions were made.
yes.
And can you identify for me specifically what you have modified on that page?
The big picture, there were 3 instances in here where I referred to rate base when it should have been referred to as cost of capital to make sure we got the jurisdictional language correct as far as how accumulated deferred income taxes affect it. So it would be, where did I specifically change it here on page 6? It's in the, I call it the second full paragraph, the last sentence there that said including in the computation of capital structure, as opposed to originally it said including in the computation of rate base.
Well, thank you for identifying that. Would you agree with me that capital structure is one element of rate base?
Well, capital structure, I don't know that it's an element of rate base, but they have equivalent, when it comes to deferred income taxes, it has an equivalent meaning whether you decide to have a reduction in rate base for the accumulated deferred income tax or include it as zero cost capital. It's essentially math, right?
Rates are generally all math.
I mean, both those are equal in their math result.
But generally speaking, if you ask somebody in the utility world whether capital structure and rate base are equal concepts, the answer would be no. Isn't that correct?
I think that's correct.
Okay. And did you change that anywhere else on this page? Or was it on to the next?
I'd have to.
Your Honor, if I may, we filed a red line with this yesterday. I have a copy of the red line if it would be efficient for us to hand this to the witness who does not have a copy of the red line of these changes.
That would be fine. I don't have an objection to that.
Yes, thank you. We'll go off the record.
No.
What did we change?
And I'm not trying to trip them up.
We'll go back on the record.
Thank you. Having been provided with a copy of the red line of your corrected testimony or modified testimony, can you see then that you've made changes on lines 13, 14, and 15?
Correct.
So on lines 13, you changed the rate base to capital structure so that if I&M's capital structure is stated without regards to the DTA, and that's deferred tax asset, is that correct? Okay. So again, changing capital structure, changing rate base to capital structure is, for the purposes of this analysis, those are not equivalent terms, are they?
Well, they're not equivalent terms, but when it comes to talking about accumulated deferred income taxes, whether it is a component of rate base or is a component of capital structure, is an equivalent result. And many jurisdictions have accumulated deferred income taxes as a reduction to rate base. A few jurisdictions, like Indiana and Florida, have it as a zero-cost component of capital.
I appreciate that additional explanation, but my question was, they are not equivalent terms, are they?
No, they are different terms.
And this revision was provided yesterday, is that correct?
That is
October
correct.
14th? So
Correct.
a day before the hearing?
Correct.
And if you know, would you agree that yesterday was a state holiday?
It was, is my understanding.
Yes. So this change to your testimony was provided maybe 24 hours before this hearing,
Correct.
and the parties did not have an opportunity to respond to these changes, did they?
That seems reasonable to assume.
Thank you. And on line 15, again on that page 6, and it's part of that whole sentence from lines 15 down to 16, or 13 to 16, I'm sorry. So if I&M's capital structure is changed, is stated without regards to the DTA stemming from its NOLC, then the accumulated deferred federal income taxes are overstated. That's as it has been changed, is that correct? From
Yes,
what it was
yes, that-
originally?
That was changed.
Okay. And previously it said if I&M's rate base is stated without regards to the DTA stemming from its NOLC, then the reduction from rate base accumulated deferred federal income taxes is overstated. So again, this is modifying, you're identifying this as the capital structure only. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, I took a look at your qualifications. They're pretty impressive. But are you a rate-making expert?
I am not.
So you testify regarding the tax implications on utility rates?
Correct.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Ms. Nyhart,
May I
redirect?
have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, we'll go off the record.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We'll go back on the record.
Mr. Reno, you had some questions from Ms. Hitz regarding the revisions to your testimony filed in this cause. How would you characterize the nature of the changes you made?
I would call them minor changes to add clarity,
Why?
because we wanted to make sure we were consistent in describing the effect of accumulated deferred income taxes with respect to how rates are handled in this jurisdiction. So wanted to clarify that the concepts related to cost of capital and not rate base.
Mr. Fetty asked you some questions regarding the INM PLR. Do you recall those questions?
I do.
One of the questions was whether the IRS will provide general guidance or requires specific questions to be posed. Do you recall that line of
do.
questioning? Are there any rules or about what the IRS will or will not answer in the context of a PLR request?
They do have a list of areas that they will not rule in. The normalization rules are not one of those. But they also have a requirement that it be based on existing facts and not a hypothetical. So you must have, present the IRS with a set of facts that exists, and then they will only answer specific questions related to those facts, not generic tax advice.
Do you still have Wabash cross-examination Exhibit 1 there on the witness stand with you?
I do.
Mr. Fetty asked you about, was it question 17? Could you turn to that, please?
Yep, I have it.
Thanks. So what I'm looking at is the actual question on question 17, which is, will the FERC permit an entity to use a separate return method for FERC financial accounting and reporting? Do you see that?
I do.
What's the difference between rate making and financial accounting and reporting, if any?
I believe it can be, distinct differences about what gets reported for financial reporting and then what eventually is included in the rate making.
What is the FERC addressing in question 17?
Financial accounting reporting.
Do you know whether AEP follows this FERC rule?
I'm not certain.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reno. The bench has no questions. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
We'll go off the record.
Yes.
We'll go back on the record. Ms. Nyhart, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Petitioner calls Jessica Chris.
Okay, we'll go off the record. We're back on the record. Ms. Nyhart?
Thanks, Judge. Ms. Chris, will you please state your name and business address for the record?
My name is Jessica Chris, and my business address is 1 Riverside Plaza, Columbus, Ohio.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity, please?
I'm employed by American Electric Power Service Corporation, and I'm the Director of Tax Accounting and Reporting.
You're presenting direct and rebuttal in this cause, right?
That's correct.
Do you have before you on the witness stand what we had marked for identification purposes as Petitioner's Exhibit 1?
Yes.
And as Petitioner's Exhibit 1, a copy of your direct testimony, including your attachments JMC 1 through JMC 4?
That's correct.
Do you also have what we marked for identification purposes as Petitioner's Exhibit 2?
Yes.
And as Petitioner's Exhibit 2, a copy of your public rebuttal testimony, including your attachments JMC 1R through JMC 3R?
Yes.
Now, do you also have a green piece of paper up there on the witness stand?
Yes.
And is that marked as Petitioner's Exhibit 2C?
Yes.
Now, that's the confidential version of page 42 of your rebuttal, correct?
Correct.
Do you adopt Petitioner's Exhibits 1, 2, and 2C as your sworn testimony in this cause?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Petitioner would move to admit Petitioner's Exhibits 1, 2, and 2C.
Any objections, Mr. Fetty?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Becker?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Hitz?
No objection, Your Honor.
Petitioner's Exhibits 1, 2, and 2C are admitted into the record of this cause.
Thank you. The witness is available for cross-examination, Your Honor.
Mr. Fetty, you may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Chris.
Good morning.
What was your role as Director of Accounting and Reporting in drafting well, first let me start off by, you sponsor the private letter ruling request submitted on behalf of Indiana Michigan Power Company in this cause, correct?
That's correct.
What was your role in drafting that?
I actually did not participate in the drafting of that ruling request.
Were you a reviewing official or any?
No.
Looking at what's been marked Exhibit JMC 1, who was it that drafted the language in the rulings requested section?
That would be the tax legal team. I believe some of the I&M case employees also worked on it as well as our legal counsel.
Do you recall the process of getting feedback from what I'll call the settling parties / interveners in cause number 45576 prior to the private letter ruling being filed with the IRS?
I believe there were meetings or conferences to discuss the nature of the PLR and the wording. And in my attachment JMC2, there are emails that also provide context to some of the discussion on the filing. That's starting on page 28 of attachment JMC2.
Did the intervening, based on your recollection and your review for this, did the interveners / settling parties recommend modifications to the rulings requested section?
I don't have any context to that. I was not involved in the process. The emails in my attachment are between Ms. Nyhart and Beth Helene of the IURC.
You're not aware if any ruling, any changes were requested in the rulings requested section?
I am not. I'm only aware of what is in my attachment, as I was not involved in the process.
If you would, please turn to attachment JMC-1R. This is the SWEPCO PLR.
All right, I'm there.
See, it looks like page 7, 8 of your document number, page 5 and 6 of the PLR, there's a reference to Commission B.
Yes, I see that.
Is that a reference to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission?
That's correct.
And if you go down on page 8 of your marked exhibit, I think it's page 6 of the SWEPCO PLR, it references benefits and burdens.
Did you say that was at the bottom of page 8?
It's at top of page 6. Top of page 6. Top of page 6 of the PLR. Top of page 8 of your marked exhibit.
Yes, I see the sentence.
And then not to jump around too much, but in JMC2R, paragraph 5 of the FERC order, which is marked as page 3 of your exhibit.
I'm on page 3.
Do you see a reference there also to the benefits and burdens test?
Yes, I see that sentence.
Are you familiar with FERC's benefits and burdens test for income taxes?
Yes.
Can you explain that to me?
In general, the benefits and burdens means that the tax expense in rate making should reflect the benefits and burdens, or, you can also say operating income or expenses in that specific company's rate making. So the benefits and burdens are related to the activities, the operating activities of that company in that rate-making filing.
Is the benefits and burdens test concerned with cash payments from parent company for utilization of I&M's net operating loss carry forward?
I don't believe so.
Just a question. If you weren't involved in the private letter ruling, why did you sponsor that exhibit?
It was included in the filing with the IRS. The email attached to JMC2, Ms. Nyhart asks if the emails can be attached and provided to the IRS. So that is part of the ruling request itself. So that is why I sponsored it.
Was there any rate making? Did I&M AEP have any rate making experts involved in preparation of the submission to the IRS?
I am not aware because I didn't have a list of the specific parties that were part of the filing.
Moving on, in your rebuttal testimony, starting at, it's question 46, page 38, line 16. You state that the proposal by Mr. Garrett would constitute an indirect normalization violation, and you provide an example of an indirect normalization violation in question 48, which is rebuttal page 39. Is that correct?
I apologize. Can you tell me what sentence on page 46 you were looking at?
Question 46.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm sorry, we're looking at, I just didn't,
The rebuttal testimony.
pager question, I'm so sorry.
Question 46.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, I see where we are now. And could you please repeat the question?
Yes, sorry about that. You state that the proposal by Mr. Garrett would constitute a, quote, indirect normalization violation, end quote, and you provide an example of an indirect normalization violation in question 48. Correct?
That's correct.
Is it fair to say that it would be the commission's rate action that would cause a normalization violation?
In this instant case, if the commission were to adopt the proposals of OUCC witness Garrett or IG witness Gorman, it would be I believe that it would be an indirect normalization violation.
But I mean, isn't it true that a normalization violation cannot occur until the rates of I&M are changed?
A normalization violation occurs when a commission or taxpayer knowingly puts into practice a rate making that is in violation or does not fall under the normalization rules.
I guess you're not directly or answer my question. I mean, yes or no? I mean, does a normalization violation, can a normalization violation occur until the rates of I&M are changed?
No.
Would you agree that the essence of your proposed normalization violation with Mr. Garrett's proposal begins when the regulatory liability is amortized in rates?
I believe that when the practice occurs, or when the practice is put into place, that is when the normalization violation would occur. I don't think it would be when the amortization begins. I believe this is a practice put in place that I believe is a normalization violation.
So I guess yes or no, again, would you agree that the essence of your proposed normalization violation with Mr. Garrett's proposal begins when the regulatory liability is amortized in rates?
No, not when it's amortized.
In your rebuttal testimony at question 34, this is page 26, lines 18 and 19.
Yes?
Correct. You state that the cash receipt from AEP parent via the tax allocation agreement is characterized as either a loan or equity infusion.
That's correct.
Are you familiar with the accounting entries used to record the utilization of I&M's net operating loss carry forward in the consolidated tax return?
I am, yes.
And did I&M record an accounting entry to recognize debt outstanding as a result of the use of its own net operating loss carry forward by the parent?
It did not. We follow an accounting policy specific to consolidated tax allocations, which does not impact equity or debt.
Yes or no, did I&M record an accounting entry to its FERC account 211 to record an equity infusion as a result of the use of its own net operating loss carry forward by the parent?
It did, no.
Yes or no? So is it correct that for accounting purposes, the FERC Form 1 does not reflect a new debt or equity infusion?
Yes, for accounting and financial reporting purposes.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I have a moment?
We'll go off the record.
One more question, Your Honor.
We're back on the record.
Thank you. Does creation of a regulatory liability create a normalization violation, yes or no?
I don't think you can answer yes or no to that question without knowing what the regulatory liability represents or is, it's too hypothetical.
I guess we'll restate that yes, no, or you do not know. Does creation of a regulatory liability create a normalization violation?
Just objection to the limitation of the options. Yes, no, or she doesn't know. It mischaracterizes her prior response, which was the question doesn't provide enough information for her to be able to provide an opinion on the topic. So we've mischaracterized it, and now we're limiting her to 3 options to answer, which is not reasonable given the prior testimony.
I don't know why it's not reasonable. I think it's a fair question. I characterized my question based on her response.
I'm going to say objection overruled. And if you need to restate the question, Mr. Fetty, go ahead.
I guess yes, no, or you do not know. Does creation of a regulatory liability create a normalization violation?
Based on not having any context on what that regulatory liability is for, I don't know.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Becker?
No questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Hitz?
No questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Nyhart?
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, we'll
Thank
go
you.
off the record.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We'll go back on the record.
Ms. Chris, you had some questions during cross-examination about when a normalization violation occurs. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
Does the IRS have any rules regarding notification of normalization violations?
The IRS doesn't have any specific outlined procedures for reporting a normalization violation. You can report them on your tax return, self-report them on your tax return, but the IRS doesn't specifically have an outline that says X, Y, or Z causes a normalization violation at X, Y, and Z time frame.
Do you recall testifying that when the practice is adopted, that's when the normalization violation occurs?
Correct. When a commissioner taxpayer knowingly puts into practice a method of rate making that is against normalization rules, it becomes a normalization violation.
So at that point in time, does the normalization violation, or belief that there is one, trigger any requirements by the taxpayer?
I believe so. At that point in time, when it is knowingly put into practice, is when follow-up with the IRS and the normalization violation would occur.
All right, nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. The presiding officers have no questions. Thank you, Ms. Chris.
Thank you.
We'll go off the record. We'll go back on the record. Ms. Nyhart.
Thank you, Your Honor. Petitioner calls Donna Sager Lawson, and Ms. Pashas will handle Ms. Lawson.
Thank you. We'll go off the record. We'll go back on the record. Ms. Pashas.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and business address for the record? My name is Donna Seeger Lawson. My business address is Indiana Michigan Power Center, P.O. Box 60, Fort Wayne, Indiana, 46801. And by whom are you employed and in what capacity? I'm employed by Indiana Michigan Power, which is an AEP operating company, and I'm the Director of Regulatory Services. Did you prepare testimony, both direct and rebuttal testimony for this proceeding? Yes, I did. And do you have before you what's been marked for identification purposes as Petitioner's Exhibit 3? Yes. And is that a copy of your direct testimony? And does it include your attachments DRSL1 through DRSL4? It does. Mm-hmm. Do you also have before you what's been marked as Petitioner's Exhibit 4? Yes. And is Petitioner's Exhibit 4 a copy of your corrected rebuttal testimony? Yes. Do you have any changes or corrections to either of those pieces of testimony? No, I do not. Do you adopt Petitioner's Exhibit 3 and Exhibit 4 as your sworn testimony in this cause? Yes. Thank you. Your Honor, we would move to admit Petitioner's Exhibit 3 with attachments and Petitioner's Exhibit 4.
Any objections, Mr. Fetty?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Becker?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Hitz?
Objection, Your Honor.
Petitioner's Exhibits 3 and 4 are admitted into the record of this cause.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Seeger Lawson is available for cross-examination.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
In cause number 5576, which cause number 45576, If you want to turn to your exhibit DSLR-2, page 2,
Are you in her direct testimony?
in her direct testimony.
Yes, I see that.
Are you familiar with the process I&M used to engage with interveners pursuant to section 1.A.1, small c, two little i's of the settlement agreement?
Yes, I'm somewhat familiar with that process. Sorry. Somewhat familiar with that process.
Can you explain that process?
As the settlement says, the two little I says the settling parties recognize that American Electric Power affiliates have already submitted or are concurrently submitting PLR requests for affiliated entities on this issue. In the event that one or more AEP affiliates receive a PLR from the IRS prior to I&M, within 10 business days, I&M will notify the settling parties and provide a copy of the affiliate PLR to the settling parties pursuant to a non-disclosure agreement. You may keep going.
No, that's fine. We've got that in the record. I guess my question is, what role did you play as Director of Regulatory Services in ensuring that this provision of the settlement agreement was carried out?
I do know that there were several online Teams calls with the parties throughout this process to share with them what our draft PLR looked like, and they provided feedback, and we discussed that on several calls. I was on a few of those, but not all of them, and I was not involved in drafting the PLR.
Would you agree that the scope of the PLR to be filed pursuant to the settlement agreement was only broadly described in the settlement agreement?
I wouldn't say that. I think it has a very specific process of how the parties will agree on how the PLR is developed, that we would incorporate the settling parties' input. But ultimately, that it says I&M shall make the final determination of the contents of the PLR and will make good faith efforts to incorporate timely, reasonable feedback from the non-settling parties.
And with respect to Commission Order in cause number 45933, which I think is your exhibit DSL-4, section 1.4.2, would you agree that the statement regarding the scope of the PLR to be filed is broadly described?
I'm sorry, which section was that?
1.4.2.
I don't think that section describes the PLR.
Are you on DRSL 4, page 2?
Yes.
Can you read the first sentence of 1.4.2?
Section 1.4.2 on page 2 of attachment DRSL 4 says that if the IRS PLR determines that failure to reinstate the proposed NOLC ADFIT in the calculation of I&M's capital structure constitutes a normalization violation, I&M will initiate a limited proceeding to update I&M's tax rider to reflect the NOLC adjustments, along with any commission-approved offsets in rates on an ongoing basis and to recover the regulatory asset.
And you don't consider that to be a description of the process to happen for the PLR?
I don't believe that's describing the PLR. I think that's describing this process, this limited proceeding to establish the tax rider.
And would you agree that that's broadly describing this process?
No, I think it's very specific. It says it's a limited proceeding designed to establish the tax rider.
Do you know if the draft PLR was submitted to FERC's chief accountant?
I wouldn't know that.
Were you aware that the draft PLR would, were you aware that the intervener/settling party suggested changes to the draft PLR?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Were you aware that the interveners/settling parties suggested changes to the draft PLR?
I am aware that the settling parties had conference calls with INM during the drafting process and had discussions about what would be in the PLR.
Would you be able to explain the process INM took to evaluate the proposed changes by interveners/settling parties?
I do not know. I'm not a tax expert.
Were you involved at all in working with incorporating changes and suggestions by the intervening parties?
It was not, no.
Moving on to your rebuttal testimony. At question 11, page 6, if I'll give you a minute to get there.
Okay, yes, I'm there.
You expressed disagreement with witness Mr. Gorman's proposed 10-year amortization of one-time costs, correct?
Yes.
Would you agree that the INM private letter ruling did not address the amortization of one-time costs?
I would have to review it again to see what it said specifically, but I don't think so.
And assuming we're not considering extreme amortization periods, to your knowledge, do you know of any absolute limit to the amortization period of the one-time cost?
I'm aware that the PLR says something along the lines of that it should be resolved in the shortest time possible. I'm not sure what the words are exactly, but something along the lines of, in its next possible opportunity to fix the normalization violation.
And correct that INM's proposed amortization period of 2 years was not approved or authorized by the commission or in the settlement agreement?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that question.
That INM's proposed amortization period of 2 years was not approved or authorized by the commission or the settlement agreement?
The 2-year recovery period is what INM has proposed in this limited proceeding to recover the regulatory asset. A 2-year period, as I said in my testimony, is commonly used to recover certain regulatory assets in rate making.
But that 2 years has not been approved prior to the filing made in this proceeding.
That's correct.
If the 2-year amortization will not violate normalization, why not 5 years?
Again, I understand that our tax experts' testimony, Ms. Chris and Mr. Reno, they indicate that lengthening the amortization period would present an additional risk that there could be a future normalization violation.
Is that 5 years, 10 years? Did any specific dates to that?
I don't know. I'm not a tax expert.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
We'll go off the record.
Your Honor, nothing further.
We'll go back on the record.
Nothing further, Your Honor. We'll pass the witness.
Okay. Ms. Becker,
No cross, Your Honor.
Ms. Hitz,
No questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Pashis, redirect?
May I just have one moment to confer?
Yes, we'll go off the record.
No redirect, Your Honor.
We'll go back on the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have no redirect.
Okay. We'll go off the record for one moment. We're back on the record. Thank you, Ms. Seeger-Lawson. There are no questions from the presiding officers. We appreciate you being here. We'll go off the record. We got 15 minutes till 11.
Oh. Can you, Thursday, what's your spacing, Terry? Because that's also going to drive it in terms of responsive. Oh, okay. Is it the, because the Duke case is due the following week. What? How much time? We haven't. I said we haven't. It's okay, I'll just show you my big one. How much time do you guys want? We're definitely gonna file something. So, but we have it, they file the 28th, we've got Duke cross answering the 31st. So then, I will have to open up my calendar to see final dates. I refuse to file on Mondays, by the way, Jeremy. Let me make it the 20th, only because I'm going to be out of town and we've got a filing that I think we want to make right around then too. So let me see what my, that's the, how about Thursday or Friday the 22nd, rather than at the beginning of the week? I'm okay with Thursday. I can't do it at the beginning. Are you okay with the 21st? So then the following week is Christmas, and I don't want to,
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I was planning to take that week off.
So we want to, so I tend to avoid Mondays and Fridays, so, but you,
21st is
is the 21st fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's
I know. I'd rather file before Thanksgiving than after Thanksgiving.
I mean, because we got a file NIPSCO, 19th of December.
Oh, the direct testimony, or I'm sorry, the intervener testimony, yeah.
Yeah, we use Susan.
4th. I think that's fine.
We're back on the record. Petitioner?
We rest.
Thank you. Mr. Fetty?
Wabash Valley Power rests.
Thank you. Ms. Becker?
Thank you, Your Honor. The I&M Industrial Group would like to offer into the record what has been previously marked as I&M Industrial Group Exhibit 1, which consists of the verified direct testimony of Michael P. Gorman, which was previously pre-filed on August 13th, 2024.
Any objections? Petitioner?
No objections.
Mr. Fetty?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Hitz?
No objection, Your Honor.
Industrial Group's Exhibit 1 is admitted into the record of this cause.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Industrial Group rests.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hitz?
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, we'd offer what's previously been marked for identification as Public's Exhibit Number 1, the testimony of Mark Garrett.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Mr. Fetty?
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Becker?
No objection, Your Honor.
Public's Exhibit 1 is admitted into the record of this cause.
Public rests.
Okay, thank you. While we were off the record a moment ago, the parties had an opportunity to discuss and agree on a post-hearing briefing schedule. Could you please tell us about that?
Yes, Your Honor. I&M will file its proposed order on or before Monday, October 28th. The OUCC and interveners will file any exceptions on or before November 21st, and I&M will file its reply brief on or before December 4th.
Okay, thank you. All right, everyone, we're adjourned this morning.
Thank you, Your Honor.